This is your place for all things Detroit Red Wings and all things Chicago Blackhawks. With your hosts, Jordan Linscott, David Barnhouse, Nick LePage, and Tim Stompanato. This is the Stick Blade Podcast. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Stick Blade Podcast. It's your place for all things Detroit Red Wings, all things Chicago Blackhawks, the news around the NHL. The NHL All-Star break is going on this coming week. Basically, there's not going to be no games really at all this week for us to talk about. The NHL tries to do their whole skills competition, best play against the best with the best style games. So they give a lot of the players a break for that weekend. I'm your host for tonight, Jordan Linscott. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Tim Stompanato, David Barnhouse, and Nick LePage. Everybody, welcome to the show. Like I said, this is your place for all things Red Wings, all things Blackhawks. But with that being said, there's not really a ton of news for the Wings this week. It's been a slow week for the Wings, except for the fact that, well, they're still the Red Wings. The Blackhawks, I mean, I feel like it's kind of like a two-part discussion that we're going to be having. Bo Horvat got traded from the Vancouver Canucks to the New York Islanders, and it kind of set the trade market for like the superstar caliber players this upcoming trade deadline. And Patrick Kane's going to be in that discussion. So kind of talking, what are the Hawks probably looking at for a return for him, just based on what the market looks like it's going to be setting at.
Speaking of superstar player acquisitions, I just want to say, before the show started, we once again did a free agency signing period. And I once again, lucked out and got myself Braden Point. So,
that's really cool. Like, you can talk all day about Braden Point, but I did pick up the best mustache in the league with Stuart Skinner. And I also got myself an actual NHL goalie. So, like, who really won this draw?
Me.
Yeah, no, you. But I'm coming for you.
God, I just want to know, Nick, when he goes back to the pile, the next card on the pile is Connor McDavid. That would just be the best.
No, he wasn't. When I went back in there, and like when I went back in there, but like picked up the cards and I did a little gloss back, it wasn't McDavid. So no worries.
You guys would have been done.
Let's jump on into this, boys. Yeah, we just spent an hour doing a card draft that should have taken 15 minutes, but I'm ready to
Yeah, I'm not a videographer, guys. I'm not a videographer.
You did your best, and we're all proud of you.
Yeah, thanks.
So I feel like the only way we can really talk about the Hawks piece of news is by first, weirdly enough, going over the Bo Horvat trade.
Right.
So, for anyone who hasn't really been paying attention to what's going on around the NHL, the Vancouver Canucks traded Bo Horvat to the New York Islanders in exchange for who is it? Beauvillier is how you say his name?
Anthony Beauvillier, first round pick that's top 12 projected, and then Atu Ratti, who was a first round pick a couple years back.
Second rounder projected.
Was he officially the first of the second round?
I think he was 35th overall.
Yikes, he was once projected to be the first overall pick.
But so a little bit of background, that was kind of the trade market that got established for superstar players. And also, let's remember, Bo Horvat expires, what is it, after next year, I believe?
After this
Jesus,
year.
his contract expires.
Okay.
Yeah.
So his contract is over
He
this
doesn't
year.
expire.
Someone expired today. We'll get into that one too.
Oh, we'll be talking about that in a bit. What a segue. Oh boy, we're buzzing today, boys.
Sorry.
That might be the most savage segue we've had
Holy
on this
cow.
show.
No, we're not segueing yet. I should have saved that one for later.
I mean, it came out so naturally. It was perfect. But no, Jordan, I'm with you. The thinking of talking about, I know it's wild to start Hawks news with a non-Hawks trade, but I think this is natural in the progression we've had discussing Kane and Toews and their potential time getting up to the trade deadline as trade pieces, potentially. Bo Horvat has been, as the entire year's gone on and contract negotiations have not been, pretty between the Vancouver Canucks and Bo Horvat. That plus the state of the franchise, it was very evident that a trade was incoming to move their captain, Bo Horvat, who was also having a phenomenal, year with goals and points. This is the interesting thing that ties it to Kane and Toews. He was one of the first players that we've seen moved this year that is going to be a UFA at the end of the year. So he's not going to have his rights controlled by the team. Theoretically, if he doesn't sign an extension with the Islanders, he could walk in free agency. So the risk, of course, is the Islanders, until there's a contract in place, this could be a pure rental for this year. With that in mind, they have set the trade market value for a star center at a roster player, a top prospect, and a first round pick. And the exciting thing about that is when we then look at Kane and Toews, theoretically, the center market is already set with that price. That helps us raise a little bit with Jonathan Toews if we retain some salary. Suddenly we have a little bit of a picture of the parameters of what we think a trade could look like. Patrick Kane is not a center, but he is that difference maker. If he's the person keep in mind, the Islanders are 2 points out of a playoff spot right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they felt it was worth to grab Bo Horvat, a legitimate playoff team that thinks Kane could be the difference maker that puts them over the top. Suddenly the market is set on what value is there. I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, no, just to quickly touch on Bo Horvat more.
Yeah, please.
I don't want to gloss over it just because it's the first blockbuster trade of the season.
Yeah,
it's finally getting the ball rolling. But that, like you said, this is the market setter now. Lou Lamoriello, I know a lot of GMs and probably owners out there are probably pissed that he's the one setting the market.
I've already seen some reports come through with that.
So I know they're not happy with the market being set this early. And that's only going to put teams in a panic mode when it comes close to the trade deadline. It's like, oh my God, like they gave up that much for Bo Horvat and he's on an expiring deal. I do want to get it. I know Canucks fans aren't really overwhelmed with the return. They are very whelmed, I guess. But Bo Horvat, he's on pace for 50 goals, 87 points this season. Phenomenal player. But the key is he's a UFA. UFAs, I mean, usually when you see this kind of trade made, if you're giving up future assets like this, you would think there's an extension in place. But that's why maybe there wasn't multiple first round picks included, because there's no extension in the works right now. We could always see that be made after the deadline or closer or after the season's over. But now translating it over to Kane, I think the Canucks were in a worse spot than the Blackhawks are when it comes to making this move. I think Kane is more than welcome, more than happy if the Hawks are like, hey, we want you back. He'll resign. If they don't get what they want, we'll resign Kane for another year, maybe kick the can down the road for another year. Bo Horvat was not going back to the Canucks. They were not on the same page. And quite frankly, this is the move they had to make. And I don't think they were able to get the most. And I think they kind of rushed it. They could have got a little more as time got closer. I think they kind of rushed it because they just need a culture change and everything like that. So that's one part of it. As for the center market, Jonathan Toews is now the second best center probably available.
I think that's probably a fair statement. Yeah.
If not the first. Ryan O'Reilly's probably number one that's going to be available left.
And I think he's available.
I think it goes Ryan O'Reilly and Jonathan Toews. Teams are going to overpay for a center. I know Jonathan Toews is not a shell of what he was, but the center position is the most valuable position besides goaltending when it comes to the playoffs.
And here's the thing, and I'm gonna build on that. I think Ryan O'Reilly is going to be a phenomenal number one or number two center. I think teams are going to be looking at picking up Jonathan Toews as a number two, number three center. That said, we've seen in the past so many times teams moving. I mean, we got Vermette a few years back for a first round pick.
Mm-hmm. And he was third line center for us.
Yeah, he was our third line center. I think it is realistic if we retain salary, which why wouldn't we, to sweeten the pot? I think a first round pick at this point is realistic for Jonathan Toews. Maybe not a prospect, maybe not a player, but I think with the way the market is set, Jonathan Toews at $5 million, I think a first round pick is not unrealistic. And certainly if there's a third party involved to launder that other, to get him down to like 2.5 million, first round pick, I think, is actually very reasonable for Toews now.
What about you guys? What do you think on the other side? From looking at the outsider's view, we have our hopes up for what the market could look like for a Kane or a Toews. But as for what you guys see when a elite forward who we were just talking about, maybe Bo Horvat to the Red Wings, obviously that move is made. What do you see the market shaping up out to be now?
I think Kane is the bigger haul because Kane is a game-changing player, of course. And I know there was a trade that we kind of hinted at that was talked about for the Rangers for Kane, and I think that is a pretty reasonable trade. You need to give some pretty decent pieces and picks for him. Toews is the harder one for me because, yes, he is a center, but he missed an entire season. Not last year, was it? Or was it 2 years ago?
No. I think it was 2 years ago was the season he missed.
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Last season, he didn't look great from what I remember. And this season, he's been okay. Would a change of scenery be different? Maybe. I think you could at least get a first for him, depending on like the salary and everything like that. But anything else with it, I'm not sure. Like maybe other smaller picks, but I don't know. What do you think, Jordan?
I mean, obviously Kane is the big haul. It's no question about it. He's going to absolutely get the way bigger return than of the two. We've talked about it already. The potential of like just him going to play with Artemi Panarin again in New York. What kind of return that would look like? I think the real question comes down to when you're trading Kane somewhere, who's the player that you want back in return? I think that's really the big question that the Hawks should be asking is what is the player that you're wanting back in return? And like, is the team that you're going to trade him to, how much of a cap bind is that team in? Because the Blackhawks are automatically going to get a first from any team they're going to trade him to. I can't see a world where you don't get at least a first plus for Patrick Kane.
Yeah, that's a good transition right there, Jordan, because there was a Kane speculation trade going on, right? That John Scott believe it all, of all players, John Scott. I know.
I love it.
I love John Scott. I think he has some insiders inside the league and knows what they're looking for.
And he's also played with Kane. He's got an interesting perspective playing on a couple different teams and playing with these guys in the league.
Yeah. And he stated that if in a trade with the Rangers, you want to get one of Alexis Lafreniere or Kako. And that's where it starts, with one of those players. And you get a first round pick with them. Yes. Because their kid line's kind of underwhelming. I could see it. I think that's what you should be aiming for is Kako or Lafreniere. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Hawks end up with like a Kravtsov in a first.
I was gonna bring that up. I think the possibility of seeing a first, maybe a second, and Kravtsov is more realistic than a first and Lafreniere or a first and Kako. I think either a first, second, and Kravtsov, or a first Kravtsov and a third, or something like that. Because they have been back and forth. Again, I love the Rangers. When I'm not watching the Hawks, I'm watching the Rangers. They have struggled for a couple years to find that spot. Vitaly Kravtsov wants to play. They didn't have a real role for him. He went, back to Russia for a year. He comes back. He's, they're butting heads because there's not a spot for him. I think moving Kravtsov solves a problem that I don't think the Rangers know how to solve, because they're overloaded right now with people. If they can move him and maybe a first, I think that throwing in a second or a third to solve that headache and to give more time to Lafreniere and Kako pays off for them.
Yeah. That's the only thing, like, I'm on point. I agree with that because, like, you're going to have to kick in more. Like, Krasov in a first doesn't get it done.
No.
It doesn't get it done because you look at the Claude Giroux trade last season. You got traded to Florida for a first, Owen Tippett, and there was another piece to it, right?
I want to say it was, there was another piece to it for sure.
Yeah,
And that's sort of what I'm basing it off of is the Claude Giroux trade.
And Owen Tippett he was a phenomenal prospect. I
still think he's got top 6 potential for sure.
Oh yeah, he absolutely does. He's still young. He was a top 10 pick. I think you aim for, you look at that. Kane, the bias is there. Giroux is a hell of a player. Kane is 3 times the player Giroux is.
Kane is a proven difference maker that can elevate the line that he's on in a way Claude Giroux is phenomenal. Kane is different.
Kane is still the 1A guy on his line. Giroux, I think is like the 2 on his line, which is still good. He's a great player. Don't get me wrong. That's great to be a 2 on a top 6 line. But Kane is a 1A. You put him with talented players. Like he puts passes on your stick that nobody else could.
You put him with a guy like Panarin that can finish that stuff. It's worth it in my that's hand over fist worth it.
So I think you still could get a first with a struggling Kako or a struggling Lafreniere. I think it's more than reasonable. Do the Rangers do it? I don't know, but I think that's what the Blackhawks need to come out guns a-blazing for, and maybe like a 4th or a minor prospect involved in that.
The thing is, though, and I think a lot of people aren't really taking this into consideration when they talk about a player like, Lafreniere, for example. Let's not forget here, like, New York did not plan to get Alexei Lafreniere.
No.
Like, that was purely a mistake pickup by them. Like, that was one of those weird things where they didn't intentionally race to the bottom to get a player like that. They were
like 13th.
Yeah, like they were basically gifted a player like him. So, you obviously don't want to say management doesn't have attachment to him, but it was one of those, it was accidental asset collection. It was one of those things where you did nothing to earn this player realistically in like standings and tanking, stuff like that. But your management didn't plan on having that player. So do they have like this is a piece of our team in 10 years from now? I don't know if they do, because I think they're still trying to win right now when they've still got Kreider. They still have Adam Fox. They've still got Panarin. They've still got Shesterkin. They've still got all of these players.
Keandre Miller.
Keandre Miller has come into his own and he's found a whole new gear.
Sorry,
this year.
Jordan,
It's
I didn't mean to cut you off.
exciting.
But like, if you asked Rangers management and Rangers fans, would you rather have Lafreniere in 10 years, or would you rather have a cup right now because we acquired Patrick Kane? I think they'd rather have the cup right now. If I'm being
100%.
honest.
Oh, easy.
100%. I think the Rangers fans would do it. And Jordan, you actually talked me into it a little more too, because like you said, it was a fortunate fall. Like, oh wow, we just got gifted the number 1 overall pick. You got to take advantage while your window's open.
The only thing I would think of is if I'm Rangers management, you could theoretically have a top 6 with Patrick Kane on it and still have that third line, that kid line that the Rangers call it, of Keitel, Kako, and Lafreniere. Kravtsov does not want. He's 23. He feels like he's ready to be top 6. Like, I think you can get away with another year of that kid line as your third line if you've got Patrick Kane in that top 6, and then figure it out from there. I think I still think that if I'm the Rangers, adding an additional second round pick to move him on top of the deal makes more sense. And I think the Hawks would be thrilled to have another top 6 kid that's actually, on the way up and whatnot. But
And
and
he's
we
still
give
got
him the
time.
spot.
It's like, dude, that's the other thing. Like Kravtsov still has plenty of time to
Oh my
actually put it
God,
all and
yeah.
get there with a contending team.
You put him on a line right now in the top 6 and just let him go wild. You throw Reichel up, you throw all that stuff. He gets hit. Everybody gets what they want theoretically. And we still get a first round pick and then maybe a second or a like. I would love Lafreniere. I would love Kako. I just don't know. You're right. They didn't plan on getting the first overall pick. They didn't plan on getting the third overall pick, but it would be wild to move on from one of those, especially when that line is playing really. That's like cemented your third line right now.
Mhm.
From that building standpoint, I don't know if I'd move them. And if I'm Davidson, I'm going to try and find. It's like playing Jenga. What's the loose one?
It's really tough. I mean, because like we've seen the Rangers struggle scoring offensively. Like it's essentially how desperate will you get to get this guy who's a proven cup winner, proven he shows up in the playoffs year after year after year. Whenever he's in there, he is your best player in the playoffs. It is going to come down to like, listen, we know your struggles. Like this kid line, is it going to hold up in the playoffs? Can they play big boy hockey?
Oh, that's a good, yeah.
Can they play big boy hockey? Like they're going to get desperate. And I think Davidson should, I think Patrick Kane should. It's tough because I know I always shit on Bowman for making last second trades at the deadline. But I think Patrick Kane, you should hold out to the very last possible second to move when it comes to deadline day, because you should be trying to milk whatever you can, and whoever and you leverage teams against each other. Whatever team gives you the best offer, he's yours.
I think Lou Lamoriello did us a huge favor.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%.
I mean, David, you haven't like, what do you think? Like,
I'm just processing. It's tough because it's like it's a double-edged sword. Like you guys said, would you want to win a cup right now? Like, but that's the thing.
I want to win it next year too. Like
you may not win it. Like the Stanley Cup is one of the hardest trophies to win in all sports, and you can have a ridiculously stacked team, but things don't always go your way. I mean, Edmonton has a very offensive powerhouse team with McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, all of them. They can't get out of the first round. The Rangers came close last year. I mean, did they go 7 with?
They went to the conference finals.
Did they go 7 though with Tampa? Did it go to 7?
No, I think it was 6 or 5.
They've got some all-star goaltending.
Yeah, I mean, you have the pieces there, but what do you give up for Kane? And like we said, like you may not win it, and that'd be a lot to give up. Lafreniere and Kako are like your building blocks for the future. Like you got Panarin, you got Kreider, you got these guys, but those two are like your future stars. They're third line now, but they will be first line in the coming years.
But will the Rangers have all the players in 5 years to take advantage of those guys being in
Yeah,
their
that's the
prime?
thing.
Well, Gary Bettman likes to gift them picks, so you never know.
I will say it's tough knowing. I think Kreider's got like 4 or 5 years left on his deal. Panarin still has a couple of years left on his deal.
Zibanejad has a big
Trouba, Fox just signed his deal. Who knows? Shesterkin's got a couple of years on his very friendly deal before it goes into another deal. This might be like, this is the window. But to your point, David, I agree with you in the sense of I don't know if I would move on from Lafreniere and Kako, because there are guys that you phase out and bring others in, etc. I think whichever one we get, whether it's again, talking as if this is going to happen. If it does happen, I think we are going to get one of Kravtsov, Kako, or Lafreniere. and it's whichever one they think is the redundancy. Do they think that Lafreniere is just a young Chris Kreider? If so, you move on from him because you've got Chris Kreider. You're locked into that for a couple of years. Which one is going to be do you already have that person? And that's the impossible question.
Yep.
But I'm gonna piggyback off that now, though.
All right.
We just talked about those contracts that are long term.
Yeah.
About these veteran contracts that are long term. How do you turn Lafreniere and Kakko into these top 6 forwards? They're log jammed. They're log jammed into third line roles.
I agree. Yeah, no, that's true. I don't think they re-sign Kane. I think Kane walks in the offseason. I think that if they trade for Kane, it is one shot. I don't see them re-signing him because of their logjam.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating scenario. I mean, because hey, you move Kane, you say, hey, go try to win this year. You pull a Vermette, you just got first round picks. You got either Lafreniere, Kakko, or Krasov, and maybe a shot at Bedard. And Kane's like, oh, I could go play with those 2 studs. I could go make these guys into something back in Chicago. He pulls a Vermette.
Especially if Toews doesn't get traded.
Or, he could go to the best team on Lake Michigan, and that's Detroit.
Ooh. Now I want to throw a real wrench in the plans.
He sees his buddy Kubalik. He sees his buddy Pia Suter. He's like, oh, they're having a good time. I'll go have a good
Pia
time.
Suter's gone. Don't talk like him. He's part of your future.
Get out. Yeah. I will say Buffalo is only 1 point theoretically out of the Eastern wild card. If we see a spike in Buffalo in the next coming weeks,
where are we? I know we're not in it.
Oh yeah, you're 7th
Like 12th.
out of 10
We've
when
had
it
a little
comes
bit
to
of
the
a
wild
drop.
card. I mean, it's something I never
Conference
thought
is
I'd
just
say.
so deep.
Buffalo is an option for Kane at this point. Could you
You think-
imagine him playing with Tage Thompson and like Jeff Skinner?
It would be phenomenal.
Skinner.
But
The
like,
way
I don't think Buffalo has that prospect pool anymore, though. 'Cause,
No, I'd want
they're a
Dylan
guy-
Cousins.
I don't think they move him though.
They
That-
won't move Dylan
Yeah,
Cousins.
yeah, you're
He's-
right. They don't have the pieces that we would want.
Like their pieces are part of their core now. Like it's their actual core.
Whereas with the Rangers, they're still
They're
like,
out.
Yeah,
They're in there, but like they're not. Like when you think Rangers, you don't go, oh, Lafreniere and Kakko. You go, oh, Panarin, Zibanejad, Adam Fox, Connor Miller. The list goes on and on.
Yeah,
you name,
Kreider,
you name
yeah.
you name everybody, but you name like
Shesty.
7 guys before that.
Jesus, yeah.
Chesty really.
It's such a fascinating scenario. And I know I do the countdown every week, but it's like what, 5 weeks now?
Yeah. I mean, we've got February. If February starts in 2 days, and that's it until what, March 3rd is the deadline.
Yeah.
We've got the shortest month of the year coming up, and that's it.
So
I do want to say on the trade side, I thought it was interesting. I found out today, Jake McCabe has a 7-team no trade clause. There is one Canadian team that's not on that no trade clause list.
Toronto.
What do they need?
They need D. I seen one trade speculated. I don't want to hammer too much on it.
I know
because I think everybody might have seen it, but Matthew Nyes, who I think
You still there, Nick?
Uh-oh.
Did he?
hello.
There he
Hello?
goes.
Hey.
All right, Tim, just take it away.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. Yeah, no, the Jake McCabe trade I think is really Jake McCabe no trade clause is interesting because I know Edmonton was interested in him, but said, I don't think that he wants to come to Edmonton. Yeah, Toronto's the only Canadian team not on his no trade clause list. And the fact that he has 2 years left on his deal, we could theoretically retain half that salary for 2 years. We're going to need to get to the cap floor anyway. It's a $4 million deal We trade him to Toronto, $2 million a year for 2 years. Holy cow. I think a prospect and a second round pick is a real, like for that sort of cost certainty for a true shutdown defenseman that could enhance your line like that when Toronto has desperately needed defense and with Jake Muzzin out. Yeah, like that's a realistic one for me.
No, yeah. The one trade I've seen floating around that's been, I think a lot of people are kind of toying with is Matthew Nyes and a first for McCabe and Lafferty. And I think that trade is the most logical move that the Toronto Maple Leafs can make.
I can get down with that. Now, in that trade setting, do you retain any salary on Jake McCabe?
I mean, you have to. Toronto's against the cap.
I think you're right. Yeah, that's a good point. But I love Lafferty to Toronto. I think he's exactly the player that Toronto needs, frankly. And then to have Jake McCabe that fills that hole, like I would love to see that move.
Yeah, if you're getting a first, you retain salary and you throw in Lafferty.
Too much fun.
It's gonna be so much fun watching The Wire this next month.
Oh yeah. God, yeah. We're gonna be watching it. It was so exciting to see a big trade break before the show. Because it usually happens.
It always happens the day after.
Yeah, exactly. That said, I feel like we've been sort of like Detroit. Do you have your eyes on any trade talk right now? Now that because I know we talked about Bo Horvat a bit. I still wonder if Elias Pettersson is a realistic option for you guys if Vancouver really does tear it down.
It's a good question. I don't know. The only rumors I've heard is like Bertuzzi. Like, are we gonna trade Bertuzzi? Are we gonna re-sign him? I don't really know because I don't know what's going on right now with the team. But Jordan, what about you?
I mean, like Bertuzzi is obviously the one that we've got to be talking about if it's anybody who's going to get like sizable return on the trade market, and it sucks because like he hasn't had the year this year that you would want to have moving into free agency with him, where you would have max value, but like would trade for him. Like, I actually think he'd be really good on the Carolina Hurricanes. So he's gritty. He's able to like just play really dirty, not dirty like ugly, but dirty like
right, not slew
very
and stuff
bodied,
like that,
physical game, which is something that I think Carolina lacks. I think Toronto lacks it too, but Toronto cannot afford that price for a player. Just like I said, they're so ridiculously up against the cap.
They can give us Austin Matthews. It'll be fair. Straight swap.
And I think Bertuzzi's got to be one that like the Wings are actively looking to shop at this point. I mean, you can't obviously hold a guy going to arbitration against him because every they're allowed that right just per the CBA. But when you've gone to arbitration twice and you're coming up on UFA status, I do kind of wonder if he really wants to be here long-term with the Wings. And if Steve Yzerman looks at him and says, yeah, he's still a long-term piece here, even though it seems like there's always a struggle to get a contract figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to, I mean, you made the point about he's not having the season you'd want as a trade value piece, but neither was Mantha when you guys got that return for him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, I know Verana hasn't, granted, he's gone through his stuff. We're not going to touch on that part, but he hasn't been with the Red Wings. I know for long.
He scored a goal last night.
That's good. That's good. That's
real
good.
beaut.
But I know it hasn't. His part of that trade hasn't amounted to what his expectations were coming in. But that was still a haul when that trade first went down.
Yeah.
I think Bertuzzi's more proven than Verana has ever been, or not Verana. Mantha was. Like Mantha had one very big season, and then it was like a slow trajectory downward after that. And then some parts it just was rock bottom real quick. But I think Bertuzzi could get you a still pretty big haul, even though he hasn't been playing up to his standards, and I'm sure Red Wings fans' standards as well. But I think he could still get you a pretty decent haul for what you guys got from Mantha, and you got Stevie Y. Like, you're not going to win a trade with Stevie Y.
I feel bad for Bertuzzi just knowing he's been out most of the year with injuries that are freak injuries. again, whenever a hockey play, sometimes it's a hip and it's like, that's a thing. But to break a hand, come back, break the other hand, like that's just such a freak thing that he's been out for. Like, I think now that he's back, if he can maintain a little bit and like if he's healthy down the stretch and he's moved at the trade deadline, I think that is your number one trade piece. I guess the question is, what do you want for him? Like, are you like first round picks cool, but it would be to a contending team. Is that really where you're at? Would you rather have would you rather do a hockey trade? And even then, if it's like a sign, like a trade and sign or a sign, like something like that, what is the return that you think is actually going to benefit the Wings? Because I think trading Bertuzzi opens up. I've talked all year about, I think you've got a logjam of players and I don't know what your real roster looks like.
Yeah.
You move on from Bertuzzi and get something back. What is it?
I mean, I'd be happy if the Wings moved Bertuzzi for a real roster player and a second and third round draft pick. Like
by real roster player, do you mean
like someone who we know for
prospect?
sure can play like 100% can play middle 6 minutes.
Okay.
What about? I mean, you guys mentioned Carolina. Necas, has Necas been popping off, or
Marty Netchus.
I love Martin Necas.
But I know that's a center, so that's a tough trade to make.
You got so many centers.
Yeah. It's such a predicting a hockey trade is so tough. Like
if you could find a place that has maybe a top 4 defense or like a middle pairing defenseman that's on the outside, that's what I would go with. Maybe even like a McCabe, honestly, or like a Murphy retained, like
Martin Netchus.
He's listed as a right wing.
I think he can play both. Yeah. It's like for Hagee,
he's
where
only like 24, I think.
24 years old. Yeah.
No, Necas is great. I don't know if and they're sort of up against, I know that there was concerns that they weren't going to be able to sign him in the offseason, that they got a deal done was a big deal.
I feel like if Detroit's going to pick up a guy like Martin Necas, so they're going to have to send either like prospects or draft capital the other way, since Necas still is under contract right now.
You can.
Yeah,
you have the ability to.
I'm trying to think of what Carolina really needs.
Carolina's biggest issue in the playoffs for the last couple of years is they have the skill. They don't have the
grit.
They don't have the body.
Bertuzzi brings that grit.
Because they've got Jordan Martinook who can do it, but like he's also a fourth line, like as a bottom 6 guy. Bertuzzi in your top 6.
And that's the thing, like the Wings, if they retain like $2 million on him, Bertuzzi for $2 million, no team in the league I think would be mad with that.
No, you couldn't be.
I think Bertuzzi's gonna be in a move like we've seen. Who was it? Was it Trocheck a couple of years ago, where it was like a straight up hockey trade?
That's what I think. I think a hockey trade makes the most sense for the Red Wings with this.
Because Trocheck was traded to Carolina, right?
Mm-hmm.
He went from Florida to Carolina.
That's exactly it. And then he signed with the Rangers.
Yeah. But that was like a straight up hockey trade. That was one of my favorite moves at the deadline. I know we were a young podcast at the time. Like that was my favorite move.
I love that.
I think we see something like that. See something along the works of a true hockey trade where the Wings are going to get a young guy who is either on RFA years or maybe on ELC, but he has already showed NHL promise. I think we're going to get a trade like that because I think the Wings are kind of over their prospect game now. Like now they need a young guy to kind of be like the face of the franchise besides Larkin and Snyder.
True.
This is kind of juicy. What if they move Tyler Bertuzzi to the Kings in exchange for somebody like Alex Turcotte, a really young center?
I think that's taking too much of a gamble.
And I don't know if that makes your team better. That said, Sean Dursey.
Bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys, if you can turn Bertuzzi into a top 6 or into a top 4 defenseman, that I think is your best move.
So what you're saying is we need to trade him to you guys for Connor Murphy plus picks, and then you guys flip Bertuzzi for more picks.
I mean,
I'm
I'm not
I don't know.
yeah, like if you had a team that was out of it, like maybe the Ducks, maybe I'm trying to think of any team right now that like actually has a defenseman like that to spare. But like if you could get a top 4 defenseman for Bertuzzi, that is the only thing, because you've got Raymond is only getting better. Verana coming back, building himself back up. I think that's phenomenal. Like, let's consider this a lost year. Injuries, all that jazz. To position yourself into next year, that's what I think is going to put you. Hell, if you've got to move Edvinsson with, to get a top 4 defenseman, you do it. So maybe, I don't know. I think that's the only way that it doesn't continue the issue that you've got of what are your forwards.
Edvinsson for Chico.
I love Edvinsson. Did you see his goal last night?
It's great, but like sooner or later, you're gonna have the New York Rangers problem.
Yeah. I think Edvinsson for Chico would be nice, but
that's exactly it. If you could do Bertuzzi, something like that. If you could be in on Chetrin, that's the way to go.
It's such an interesting approach. I think I think both of our teams are interesting spots. I think obviously one of Kane and Toews is going to be moved. I think Bertuzzi is going to be moved. I think we're going to have a very interesting show that Monday after trade deadline's finish. It's going to be an exciting time, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be a lot of probably eulogies from us Hawks fans, and maybe a eulogy or two from the Red Wings or Red Wings side. But speaking of eulogies,
Nick, you want to take that one away?
He's already away.
Yeah, that's good. Man, this is such a like.
Wait, did you guys want to swap or change subject yet? Or
I think we've talked trades
talked about
and like
trades
potential
and
opportunities in the ground.
All right, well, again, I'm going to translate out that. Speaking of into the ground,
Bobby Hull died. This is a weird one, right, Nick? Like, as a Hawks fan, you're in a weird position because on one hand, there's this absolute legend, holds a ton of Hawks records. He won the cup in the dark ages of the Hawks, like him and Stan Mikita before Kane and Toews. That was it. That was the franchise. Like, as a hockey player, there was no one quite like the Golden Jet. But then he's a terrible person, like well-documented abuser, like beat his wife. Racist. He's well-documented. Yeah. Racist, anti-Semite. He's said some terrible things and he's never apologized. In fact, he's doubled down on a lot of it. Like, that dude has a statue. Like it. And I talked about this a little bit before the podcast. I've heard for years I've been hearing with different things, whether it's celebrities or athletes, or, well, you can separate the sport from the person, or, what they do, their talent from the person. My issue with that is we don't do it before things are bad. We glorify, we deify these people. It's hero worship. Bobby, your kids grow up wanting to be Bobby Hull. He's an icon. He's a hero. And then you find out this same hero said some really terrible things and holds very terrible beliefs, has physically abused his wife. And then when asked about it later, doubled down on it. Like, I don't want to repeat a lot of the stuff on this podcast, but I encourage you to look it up if you're listening. We are dealing with.
He also said Hitler had some good ideas.
Yeah.
And went a little too far.
That's the one that I always think of. And it's really, how do I celebrate somebody that said that
don't.
believes that stuff. You can't
You don't.
do it.
You don't.
Yeah, it.
Like
I mean, it's one thing to say, yes, this was a phenomenal hockey player. He did a lot of, he scored a lot of points, but I wouldn't say he like was great for the game, because if anything, it goes back to the issue that we're trying to fix in hockey culture now. Like, it's a complicated world to process as this guy leaves a very checkered history.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's such a tough topic to talk about, because obviously we were talking before show, and it's like, this is who our parents idolize or grandparents idolize
Yeah.
on the ice, and like this was their Patrick Kane, this was their Jonathan Toews, him and Makita were those players for like our families growing up.
100%.
But now, but like not even now, like not now, but like you can't separate the art from the artist, or whatever
no
the
way,
phrase goes. Like, I think Scott Powers said it best. Bobby Holt dead, 80, 84, 85, whatever the age was. Phenomenal hockey player, terrible human being. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's what he is. He tarnished what he could have been by just being the person he was off the ice. And I don't think you could celebrate a life like that. I said it myself on Twitter. I was like, you can't say rest in peace to someone that was as terrible as a human being
No.
as Bobby Holt
Yeah.
is.
And
Yeah.
had would never repented, never had made any apology, never once looked and said, you know what, maybe I wasn't in the right. Like, I don't know. I have no space for that.
Yeah. I mean, you could, obviously, I'm going to wish condolences to
Oh my God,
his family. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
but look up some of the stuff
people
his
lost a
kids have said about
grandparent.
him.
People
Like,
lost.
I think his family probably are okay with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
No, I
shitty
know,
Especially
but-
dangling his wife off of a balcony after beating her with a steel-toed shoe. I mean, screw yourself.
Yeah, that's the stuff though. Like, I encourage people to sit and think a little bit and be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable as you're working through something like that. I've been sitting in it all day. Like, I love the Hawks. This dude was a terrible human being. And I have to now it's my job to like work with that. Like, that's a terrible place to be.
Yeah. Oh no.
Sitting
Oh,
it.
I'm anti against whatever, everything that he's said and done in the past. Screw that. I mean, family, I condolences with them. I know it's a loved one to them.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's tough,
Yeah,
but
you
I'm
hope
not
the
gonna
families.
yeah, for Brett Hull and everybody else, condolences for the tough times you're going through. But as for respecting a player that a former Hawks legend on the ice, I'm not gonna do. I mean, I was thrilled when they removed him from ambassador.
Me too.
Because
That was a big deal.
ambassadors are supposed to be good for the game,
Mhm.
and he was not good for the game at all. So,
No.
yeah. I mean, I there's really nothing else I could say about that. A really good hockey player, but a terrible person has died today at 85, and I'm gonna leave it at that because.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, we're a half Hawks podcast. It'd be crazy not to discuss that as Hawks news, but I think we have given it all the air and attention that it needs.
So,
Yeah.
I do kind of want to ask one question, and I
Yeah,
feel like
please.
it's actually kind of relevant to this discussion. Obviously, the Hawks, after I mean, it's not directly tied to it, obviously, but like after the Kyle Beach incident, the Hawks have specifically said they're really trying to change the culture of the club and the organization, stuff like that. Given the fact that Bobby Hull is dead now, do you think at some point they take the statue down or take his number out of the rafters and say, you know what, this doesn't line up at all with what we're trying to do?
Ooh.
I
I
feel like
could
that's a fair
see-
question.
No, it's a very fair question. I could see taking the statue down, leaving the number up. I'm trying to think of realistically, if we really want to do a bunch of mental gymnastics, I could see the justification for leaving the number retired, but it's one thing to have a number in the rafters where, it's, you see it, but it's there. But it's another thing to pass a glorified statue of a person walking into the United Center as we push for hockey is for everyone. I think they could remove the statue now that he's gone. I think it'd be an uproar from a certain section of the fan base. I don't know, Nick, what are your thoughts on this?
No, I think the statue eventually does come down. That's a very good question, Jordan. I think it does come down. I think it comes down. It's not going to be immediate.
No,
I do think the franchise is trying to change in a different direction. I think when it's all said and done, when Kane and Toews step away from the game and they have a statue to replace the one that's been iconically in front of the United Center for a long time, I think that's when you see that statue taken down. It's like, hey, it's a new team.
I think you keep Makita. I could see them do like a Hawks through the 8, like you have Makita, you've got Kane and Toews, you've got, Keith Magnuson, like different faces or something like that. I don't know. I would be shocked though if the statue at some point doesn't come down.
I was just curious because, like I said, the Hawks have really said they're trying to do like a major culture shift within their
Which
organization, and
was when he was sort of shifted out as an ambassador.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's gonna go away. It's gonna go away. It's just gonna take some time to get rid of it.
I've never heard. The only reason I don't think they would unretire his jersey is because I've never heard of a number being unretired, and I just don't know if we're gonna be the trendsetters to do it. Statues are one thing, you can like switch things out. Have you ever heard of a number being unretired?
No, I don't think I know. There probably is an example, but
Yeah.
But like, I numbers are like a figurative thing. Like, it's not cement. It's not a cement. I mean, yeah, it's on a jersey. I think
it's less a big deal than the statue, personally.
Yeah, a statue is you're immortalizing someone.
So I was
especially if you pass through them.
But no, like I said, I felt like it was a valid question. Just
it's a great
the
question.
Fact that, like this is it's news now. Like it's something that I kind of think people should. I mean, I do think it's something that I think a lot of people have got to have in the back of their minds at some point now. I don't have anything else on the show docket. Do you guys have anything else?
Nick had a very important question for us earlier in the day that I have been sitting with and wrapping my head around. Nick, do you want to extend this question to everyone?
Yeah. So, last week, if you guys, those that tuned into last week's episode, Tim brought up a fantastic question that what got us into hockey. And I think it's nice. It's a nice, easy way to light up, like, end the show. I mean, obviously there's news like we just talked about. That's so tough to talk about.
Yeah.
And we kind of want to go things on a light note. And me and my buddies, we got in a big discussion earlier in a group chat. And it raised a bunch of debate. It was very controversial, believe it or not. And
I love controversy.
The question is, rank your top 5 ways to consume a potato, or like styled potato. What is your top 5 in order?
I mean, I've got mine because I've been sitting with it all day. I've been discussing it with Katie. Like,
I mean, number 1, French fries.
Debatable. That's not my number 1.
That's for me. Number 1, French fries.
All right. So David, your one's French fries. Tim, what's your one?
My number 1, latkes.
Latkes are top 5.
I mean, that's fair. Damn, they're just so good.
They're so good. You a sour cream guy?
Absolutely.
Okay. They're both good, but I like sour cream.
I made a buffalo mayo thing with it. I did. Oh, we made them recently. It was a treat.
Okay. Jordan, what's your number 1?
It's got to be hash browns for me. I love me some hash browns.
Oh, hash is a good choice.
Like what version? Like the McDonald's like oval shaped hash brown?
Like the little
the
tiny
shredded-
like elementary school hash browns.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Nick.
Nick.
All right. My number one was the double baked potato.
Okay.
That's
Double
such a
baked.
good listen. I love a baked potato and
I'm
truly a double baked.
I'm gonna say I'm not a big baked potato fan.
It's not in my top 5, but I appreciate now. What's your stance on the thrice baked potato?
I don't think I've ever had one of those. That
A
sounds
little
dangerous.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're just fire.
Nick, what's your number 2? We're
I feel
snaking
like
it.
for the number
Let's do
one's
2,
obviously
3, 4,
yeah.
5. Yeah.
Yeah. Nick, what's your snake for number 2?
Oh, he can't.
Nick's-
All right, that's
Jordan?
fine.
So I mean, obviously number 1 for me, it's gotta be hash browns. Number 2 is mashed. Number 3 is fries.
Oh, wait.
What?
Yeah. So yeah, I think just give me your 2,
Okay,
3,
okay.
4, and 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 2 is mashed, 3 is fries, 4 is probably baked, and then I don't know what my 5th would be.
Okay.
I don't know if I have a 5.
That's
Like,
fair.
those are about I think
All
the
right.
only 4 ways I eat potatoes.
All right, Tim.
All
I know
right.
mine.
So
I know mine.
obviously Lockies were my number 1. Chips are my 2nd. Fries are my 3rd. Tater tots are my 4th. And vodka is my 5th. little potato vodka.
Number 1, French fries. Number 2, mashed. Number 3, latkes.
So good.
I'm gonna go. See, because number 4, I could say the hash browns that are like the shredded potatoes with like the onions and they're fried up. That's
sure.
basically a latke. Like it's a disassembled latke.
You just put it. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm gonna go tater tots number 4, and then number 5, the potato chip.
It's
Because
a
you can do
versatile
so much
chip.
with it.
Yeah.
You can do so much with it. And I just watched the Letterkenny episode where they're debating the best chip flavor.
I got
And-
emotional.
God, I got angry. I needed some air. I gotta go take some air.
Take us away with yours, Nick.
Nick, give it to us. You're the man that started it all. What do you got?
All right. At number 1, I have the double baked. I think that is it's a phenomenal treat. I actually had it for lunch today because we were talking about it, and I'm like, I want a double baked potato now. So double baked was 1. 2, I went just the traditional baked. I love a good old traditional baked.
So we
potato
got 2
too.
versions of baked potato in the top
but
2
they're
for Nick.
completely different.
No, you're right. I just think it's good to know.
Was
They-
mashed
they
my
are
number
com-
2?
Yes.
Okay, I can't remember if I said mashed or not.
And mashed was Jordan's number 2, if I recall
Yeah, Max
correctly.
was my number 2.
Was it mine
3?
too?
I did, brother. You
Shit.
get them. You
It's
did
your
them.
potatoes.
I don't know my potatoes.
Get your taters in order, bro.
3, I went mashed. Mashed potatoes, always a good way to consume.
God, I'm the only one that left mashed potatoes off their top 5 chart.
I use
Four?
mashed.
4th, this is where I went different. You guys went the Lochte.
I'm so
I
excited.
went Noki.
Ooh, gnocchi's good.
I want to put
Gnocchi's
listen.
good.
I do want it on the record. I discussed it with Kate. Again, we are both of Italian descent. We put gnocchi in the pasta cat. You're right. It is a potato.
All
It's
right,
a pasta too. It's a double-edged
You-
sword.
It's a killer choice. I just want it on record. I didn't abandon gnocchi. In my brain, I put it in a different pocket.
Yeah,
They
no,
put-
100%, 100%.
We had
And
gnocchi
you're-
at our wedding. Like, listen,
Gnocchi's
love
good.
it.
Gnocchi's good. Gnocchi's good. What's your number 5, Nick?
5, you got to have fries in there somewhere. So fries.
Gotta have fries. In
Can we
there
fries
just
somewhere.
say?
soda-
Can we just say honorable mention pierogies?
pierogies?
I
were-
was discussed on that, but that's a dumpling. Like,
Yeah.
It's potatoes though. It's potatoes.
you're right. No, you're right. And it's so good.
If we're gonna
there's a
count
lot of
gnocchi,
things
If we're gonna count gnocchi, we have to
we can count down.
pierogies.
Yes, I agree with you on that.
Pierogies just missed my list. I think fries had to be in there. I do love pierogi. Chips was also an honorable mention. I want to know. Yes, I love a sweet potato. I think it is a completely different game.
It's
This
a
is just
totally different. Sweet potato
Yeah,
fries are a godsend. However, it's a different world.
we're talking just the traditional
right.
potato.
I think next week, if we're gonna keep going potatoes, we have to do our top 5 French fry styles.
I mean, Arby's.
Well, not it isn't. Like,
just Arby's curly. That's it.
do you know what my least favorite? Like, I am a French fry fiend. I will eat French fries until I'm dead.
All right.
Like I'll keep eating. Like that's why I can't go to Red Robin because they keep bringing them to you.
No, the
But
enablers, frankly.
if my least favorite fry, and that's not saying anything because I'll still eat it, steak fry. I'm not a big steak fry guy.
Oh,
Hmm.
that's controversial. I love a steak fry.
I'm gonna have to sit on that and let that marinate for a week.
It's just potatoes. They're just. I think we take advantage of potatoes, guys. I'm of the Irish heritage, and it is a godsend. I think
they're amazing.
the biggest
fact.
debate was everybody.
Fun
What?
fact: potatoes are not native to Ireland.
It's true.
The Columbian Exchange brought them over from the Americas.
Well, we just
And
Same
then,
Same with
Yeah.
tomatoes to the Italians.
yeah. Except then the British took all of the Irish's food, and that's why
The
there was
British-
a potato famine.
And then the British took over, India because they realized their food tastes like junk and they need spice to it.
And the British still don't use spice. So what are you gonna do?
But it's
I
good.
On that,
Yeah,
on
no, I
that
think-
note,
All
I
this
start
talk of potatoes has me hungry and makes me want to go get one
going
now.
on about a free United
Oh,
Ireland. Let's
can-
go.
Can we find all dressed chips anywhere in the United States? Or do I have to go
No,
to Canada?
you
for
gotta
that?
go to Canada. You can't find ketchup chips.
I mean, Amazon you can buy them, but it's like
All right. So when we go to the Hockey Hall of Fame as a podcast and we go to Toronto to accept I'm getting all dressed chips. Yep, we're set.
like for 2 bags of chips from Ruffles, it's $21.
Jordan, take us home. We're
All right.
falling.
I'm hungry.
But I actually am getting hungry for some potatoes now,
Yeah,
so I think I
so
might
am
go
I.
to McDonald's or something and grab
I got a
some.
steak and shake
Do
like 2
it.
blocks from here. I might get some of those
Ooh.
real thin fries.
For anybody who's still with us after the potato ramblings, we appreciate you guys checking out the show and tuning in every week. At the end of the day, the podcast, it's for you guys. I mean, we all enjoy it and talking hockey and just having fun, but it's fun when you guys engage and like get a chance to listen to our thoughts on it. It's really why we do the show. So feel free to give us a like, follow, share, whatever the social media currency is that you found us on. We're all over the place on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, whatever your social media platform, we're probably on there. So feel free to check us out and give us a follow or whatever it is. Again, it helps the show grow and it's a good way to interact with us. But for that being said, I was your host for tonight, Jordan Linscott, and for my co-hosts, Tim Sampanato, David Barnhouse, and Nick LePage. This has been another edition of the Stick Play Podcast. We will check you guys all back here next time. And in the meantime, stay safe and take care of yourselves.